In the life of our heroine, the same episode was repeated again: a dark night, a native voice, an awakening in the body of a child in the arms of a mother who, giving the girl to a strange woman, asked to take care of her and promised to return soon. The peasant woman did not show any particular desire to go to meet Milady, explaining that her family was in trouble. But the woman was in a hopeless situation, and she was ready to pay for the inconvenience of the family she asked for help. The contents of the box immediately awakened the peasant woman's desire to respond to the request of the night guests. Our heroine childishly begged her mother not to give her to these people and said that she would not be able to take her, because she would soon die. But the desperate woman, of course, did not understand the baby's words, so she simply asked her daughters for forgiveness. Once again, the inevitable happened and the child was extremely inconsolable. Saying goodbye, the night guest asked the hostess of the house to carefully read a letter with some important details, which she put in the box, and with a request to take care of her little one, disappeared forever into the forest thicket. The peasant woman immediately consoled her husband and son with the fortune that had suddenly fallen on their family, and our heroine continued to cry inconsolably, because she knew what kind of hell was waiting for her again. It was a pity that she could not immediately say everything that she was already thinking about this life. The girl has already grown up a little, but this did not prevent her from immediately being recorded as a slave in the house and mercilessly exploited. To the taunts and reproaches of Andy, she reported that she worked hard all day, even though her body was only 4 years old. No one knew that Anastasia was much older in spiritual age, because she had already experienced 9 tragic deaths, and then rebirths, and now it was the 10th such time when she started a new life again. Andy did not shut up and continued to scold the girl for not working out her diet, but since Anastasia had her own opinion about this boy, she simply ignored him. One could not expect anything else from the worthless son of his parents, as, under the insults, a strong push into the bucket of water, which should have spilled over onto the girl. Since this was happening for the 6th time, Anastasia turned away, which made Andy even more angry. The young man, not satisfied with himself, began to call the girl a witch. In addition to all the mean things he did, Andy dared to call her mother a witch of some neglected kind, emphasizing that she had also abandoned her. The boy liked that he finally found something to tease the girl with and continued to tease her. No one in this house ever stood up for Anastasia. Besides, everyone tried to call her names and threatened to throw her out in the yard. This happened every day, and one day the girl couldn't stand it and called Andy lazy and clumsy. This time, Anastasia did not stop and continued to choose epithets that would suit the son of this family, among which he heard short-tempered, frail, stupid, and funny tadpole. At the very moment when Andy decided to deal with the carrion viper, someone drove up to their house. The boy decided to inquire who drove into their wilderness. As it turned out, a carriage with the flag of the Order of Chivalry drove up to their house, and Andy took wings, because he hoped that it had come for him to be knighted. Mother and son were indescribably overjoyed at the upcoming changes in their lives, and poor Anastasia knew for sure who had come, because she was desperately waiting for this visit. The majestic guest knocked on the hut and a joyful Andy immediately opened the door for him. The stranger specified the name of the family living in this house, which sent Andy a particularly happy and exciting goosebumps. But the guest quickly planted them, wishing to see the princess. The man immediately looked for the girl with his eyes and assessed what was done to her. He knelt down in front of the princess and said hello, and Anastasia at that moment was thinking about whether he was sorry, whether his heart ached, whether he felt guilty for everything that had happened to her. And the guest was none other than the hero marshal of the Veritas Castle Knight Order, who was a powerful holy knight who had defeated countless monsters and ended the 3-year war. Tian Parseal was also a knight who took a vow of celibacy under the laws of the temple. But the most interesting thing is that he was the biological father of our heroine, who has now arrived to accompany the princess to her rightful place. Andy became curious about which princess we were talking about. Then the guest called the real name of the girl and said that she is the first princess of Santra. It was very difficult for the members of the village family to imagine the girl, who worked for them for free, as a great person. But the man recalled the will of Princess Beatrice, where everything was specified in detail. The peasant woman began to find out the details of the case, given the fact that Princess Beatrice has not been among the living for 3 years. In addition, she died unmarried. It turned out that Anastasia is a bastard, and this meant that the girl has the right to inherit according to seniority. The knight put the peasant family on the spot for treating the princess dishonestly all these years, and promised to execute anyone who insulted the royal family. Tian called Anastasia to go with him, but the girl stayed for a short time, The woman with the most sympathetic expression on her face asked for compensation for keeping the princess in their family. Then Pion remembered the bill that Beatrice had left behind as she was leaving, and the woman had called it pennies, although all those treasures were simply lost at card games. The family was momentarily happy to hear that if they submitted a detailed report of their expenses to the royal family office, they would receive compensation. Only Anastasia in this life decided to do something differently and demanded not to give them a penny. The girl firmly told the knight that this family beat her every day, forced her to work, and hardly gave her food. Anastasia called them bad, and she herself decided that this time they would answer for their actions. If you delve a little into the geography and historical facts of our history, you can find out that all the events took place on the continent of Tranquillium, where two opposing sides fought for thousands of years, and 3 years ago it came to the point that the bloodiest war in history broke out, and only thanks to Pion Santra won. But this war took the first princess from the kingdom that won. The heiress, while still alive, left a will where she mentioned that she had an illegitimate daughter. Our heroine Anastasia turned out to be this girl. Nastia, walking around the palace, often heard the servants discussing her mother, and in particular the one with whom she conceived the child. I assumed that it was an enemy mercenary. The girl heard that her mother's act was regarded as a shameful stain on the royal family. Since Nastia had read about it more than once, she herself began to ask this question. And so, on the 10th revival, Anastasia still managed to find out the truth by stealing one of her mother's treasures. The girl was lucky to get a necklace with a vision stone, and now Anastasia desperately hoped that her mother had left her some kind of message in it, especially since it sounded like a native voice. Nastia was not mistaken and soon saw a magical message where her mother secretly introduced her daughter to her father. In this way, the girl found out who her father was, and it turned out to be the same knight who always took her away from the peasant's house. When the man fulfilled his duty, he never spoke to her again. Nastia remembered that she only occasionally caught his gaze on her due to the distance, and that through the senses. If there was eye contact, it was quickly broken. At such moments, Pion quickly turned away, and never once in all 10 lives did he come to her aid. The man who turned out to be her father was surrounded by such memories of the girl. This discovery made our Anastasia seriously ill for several days, and after that the girl recovered and began to make a plan called How to Survive. Nastia was going to fundamentally change the situation that was constantly repeating itself, and also take revenge on her father. Their meeting took place again, but immediately gained new momentum. A peasant family had to answer for the terrible treatment of a stranger's child left under their protection. When they began to make excuses, Nastia showed her memories with the help of a magic stone. Pion saw the head of the family drinking and calling her mother names. The woman also did not behave better, refusing even a piece of bread. Their naughty son constantly mocked the little girl and forced her to work tirelessly. Instead of worrying about her life, this family began to worry about the question of where the girl got her sorcery from. Everyone knew that people with magical abilities were the chosen ones, and most of them came from high-born families. Anastasia possessed magic from the very first life, but died before gaining at least some power. This made her angry, and therefore she decided to change her methods. Nastia offered Pion to look more at the hell she lived in and showed a fragment where Andy calls her mother a witch, with the hope that a man will not be able to calmly listen to terrible things about his beloved woman. Yes, these words had their effect. Pion reacted immediately, forever leaving in the memory of the fool that it is not bad to watch your tongue sometimes. The knight no longer needed any evidence of their guilt, and he refused the peasant family any compensation on the spot. And besides, he ordered them all to follow him to the capital. Pion, barely restraining his rage, told them that he would deliver them into the hands of a fair trial. From now on, the ungrateful family, like prisoners, set out to answer for their actions. And our Nastia sat in the carriage with Pion and headed home again. When the man asked the girl to sit comfortably so as not to fall, Nastia looked into his eyes, but he immediately hid them, as usual. At some point, Anastasia began to feel cold. Pion was worried about her and, throwing off his cape, wrapped it around the little girl. Only this did not help, and the shaking did not subside. Pion found a way out and immediately apologized for his subsequent actions. The man took the child in his arms and warmed the girl with his warmth. And Nastia, who endured only beatings and humiliation all her short years, now didn't need anything more. She immediately felt his sacred aura and decided not to judge her husband for pretending that they were not related in any way. On the other hand, if the Holy Knights of Santra broke their vow of celibacy, they were deprived of their rank. Nastia looked into her father's eyes and decided that no matter what, he abandoned her, and the girl was not going to forgive him for this, but at first she still decided to use Pion for her own purposes, and then to abandon her heartlessly, which caused deep surprise in her husband. The girl began to admire him as her savior, and then as a person who gave warmth. Pion again tried to emotionally distance himself from the girl, telling her that he was an ordinary person. But Nastia was once again outraged by her father's behavior. At that moment, Pion asked her a very untimely question about projection magic, which is impossible to master at such a young age. Anastasia got away with the excuse that she simply came to this magical response from the stone out of desperation, which once again proved to Pion that she is her mother's daughter. Even this time he distanced himself from her, talking as if he were someone else's child. For a moment, Nastia wondered how her mother could fall in love with such a person and which of them was the first to confess their feelings. Looking at Pion, it was not difficult to assume that the mother herself had seduced this knight. Of course, the man's appearance was attractive, which was worth only his long eyelashes, so it was not surprising for Nastia that her mother paid attention to this man. Our heroine finally decided to return to her plans and asked Pion to take her to the cathedral so that she could pray. The knight had an order from the king to deliver the girl immediately to the palace, which he informed Nastia about. But who could refuse these pleading eyes? The man promised that they would stop by the cathedral on the way, which made Nastia very happy. Just then, all the child's anxieties were revealed and the girl began to drift off to sleep. Just a few minutes and Anastasia was sleeping peacefully on Pion's chest, which plunged him into an unprecedented shock. And in the Santry Palace of Ratio, meanwhile, there were disturbances among the members of the royal family, caused by the arrival of the bastard. Stella, who was the third princess and Nastia's younger aunt, resented the return of her relative and believed that everyone would laugh at them. Only the emperor's head was full of completely different questions. He was more worried about the fact that his daughter Beatrice had a daughter, and that too out of wedlock. For some reason, Stella was sure that Beatrice had become pregnant by an enemy mercenary, and she confirmed this by the fact that her sister had been sent on a mission to the dark forest at that very time. The older sister tried to calm Stella's ardor. Aquila, being Nastia's first aunt, asked the emperor if nothing was really known about the child's father. The emperor then said that the will referred to the man as a collision soldier whom she had met in the dark forest and added that this was the end of the meager paternity remark. Stella again began to accuse her sister of incest, and Aquila continued to calm her down. The eldest daughter asked the emperor to approach this issue with special care and attention so as not to endanger the whole family. Each of them understood that if this girl was legitimized, she would have the right to inherit the title of queen. Pontiff Ishmael interrupted their arguments. The man decided to break into the conversation and quote a prophecy that had been sent yesterday, and now fit well into the context of the conversation. Everyone was interested in this news, considering that there have been no prophecies for more than 100 years. The pontiff announced that the one who will soon arrive at the castle will bring heavenly light to the empire, which caused indignation and questions among relatives. Ishmael declared that the servants had interpreted the prophecy and understood that the found relative was a child of God. The emperor concluded that even if the girl is not recognized as a full-fledged person of royal blood, she cannot be expelled from the family. Aquila clearly did not like this, since nothing like this was in her plans. Meanwhile, Pion and Anastasia arrived at the cathedral. The man did not let go of the girl, holding her tightly to him. Pion approached the temple officials and asked them to receive them, and also to send a letter with an explanation to the emperor. Pion's subordinates saw their captain show such emotions for the first time and tried to understand what was happening to him. Anastasia, for her part, thought that she had secured the protection of the royal family in time through prophecy. Only she did not particularly count on any divine light, knowing what darkness awaited her ahead. Pion brought Nastia to the prayer hall, where the girl asked to leave her alone. The man complied with her request, slightly embarrassed at the same time. When our heroine was left alone, she again went through the points of the plan, which until that moment had no deviations or mistakes. The girl knew that Santra was a very pious country where everyone believed in the god Lux. Although Nastia did not like this god and she was constantly trying to find out what he was punishing her for. She asked question after question but got no answer. Most of all, she wanted to live at least once more than 12 years and grow up. Nastia approached the water and took a step with a request to let her survive at least in this life. Our heroine quickly went under the water, where she found herself too deep. She began to gasp and couldn't believe that she had miscalculated this time. Suddenly, Pion's strong hands pulled Anastasia from the clutches of death. The girl was alive and coughing. At one point, she noticed an unusual look on her father's face that said he didn't care about her. It was an unexpected discovery for Nastia. In addition, the man again took the girl in his arms and warmed her with the help of his divine and healing power. The peony surrounded her with such warmth that Nastia fell asleep again. The knight reported that the princess almost drowned. The assistant girls offered to take Anastasia and take care of her while he changed his clothes. The man handed the girl over to the priestesses and returned to himself. Pion was deeply affected by today's events. He was deep in thought and in such a way that he was shaking. And it wasn't because he was wet. For the first time he could not understand the manifestations of his trembling. Pion mentally returned to the moment when the girl called him an angel. He remembered her thanking him and looking into his eyes. Each experienced moment added drop by drop to the awareness of the inevitable. Pion understood that he had begun to be preoccupied with feelings, which he did not dare to do. He remembered the promises he had made, not to look, do not put your eye on someone else's. He well remembered the principle that if someone arouses feelings, one should turn away. Pontiff Ishmael taught that desiring what does not belong to him is a direct path to destruction. And now he desperately realized that important rules had been broken. Some time later, Nastia woke up and asked where she was. People from the clergy, who watched over her, suggested that she rest further. But Anastasia immediately noticed that she was not wearing her mother's pendant. Then the priestess returned the jewel to her, which calmed the girl down. Suddenly, Nastia asked who they all were. The first to introduce herself was Sierra, who was a priestess of the second rank. And the other two girls were Rosa and Yus, who occupied the third rank of the clergy. Previously, Nastia had not met good people, so she hoped, looking at new acquaintances, that at least in this life she would be lucky. Anastasia thanked her assistants for their kindness and attention. With her words, she caused her friends to be deeply embarrassed. But at that moment, her stomach rumbled, and the servants quickly rushed to fix the problem. After a short time, Anastasia got acquainted with a very tasty soup. The food was so delicious that it brought tears to little Nastia's eyes. Yus and Rosa diligently took care of the princess, never leaving the girl. One of the girls said that now she will be taken care of in the palace, where she will not have a shortage of food. But Anastasia did not think so, remembering how in her past lives there they fed her with slop and tried to poison her. Nastia also remembered how the servant placed next to her did not fulfill her duties and she had to work herself. At this moment, our heroine wanted to keep such helpers by her side. Each of the priestesses reminded her of angels. Of course the girls were pleased to be called that, but they assumed that Pion would be offended because she was the first to call him an angel. When those present talked about Pion, Nastia remembered his face, and that genuine sincerity. The princess was so lost in her thoughts that she was already being brought back to reality. But Nastia thought about her own and came to the conclusion that Pion is a cold person who is not capable of feeling anything and was simply afraid of punishment for not fulfilling the emperor's order. Anastasia decided to pull herself together and distance herself from this irresponsible person until she fell asleep again. The next day, the princess was properly dressed and prepared for the meeting with the emperor. Our heroine looked so that it was difficult to take her eyes off her. But Nastia didn't even recognize herself, as she looked amazing now. The girl remembered that in her past life she was brought to the emperor in rags and he drove her to wash and comb her hair, calling her a dirty child. But this time she was ready to go into battle. Theon and the soldiers were preparing to go to the palace, when suddenly the man heard Anastasia's voice. The girl ran to him and again called him her angel. She greeted her father and showed off her beautiful dress. But this time Pion did not show warmth towards Nastia in his answers. The princess said goodbye to her friends and thanked them for their care. Our heroine's pleasant little adventure ended and she went to the castle, but she still wanted to see these people every day. Finally Pion reported to the emperor that he had delivered the princess, and Nastia hid behind her father and did not want to show herself to her relative at all. The fear of this family had gotten so deep under her skin that it was now showing. Even now, Anastasia could feel Aquila's gaze on her. She was the same villain, because of which our heroine was executed in the 9th life. Since the Empress and Beatrice died, Aquila ruled the court and Nastia had to play by her rules. Our heroine has always lived under the castle, in small rooms and surrounded by Aquila's people, waiting for the right opportunity. Her aunt set up accusations of black magic for her inconvenient niece, after which a crowd of commoners burned Nastia at the stake. And no one helped her. While Nastia was bound by fear, Pion turned to her and tried to calm her down. He explained that it was her grandfather, and our heroine looked into her father's eyes and did not believe that he was capable of such manifestations of feelings. Now Nastia was doubly sorry, because her father was standing in front of her and did not even suspect the reason for her trembling. Then the girl boldly stepped forward and introduced herself. Anastasia's behavior reminded the Emperor of Beatrice, removing any reason to doubt their kinship. Pontiff Ishmael confirmed the daughter's resemblance to her mother. While Aquila was silently pondering everything that was happening, Stella decided to express her doubts about their blood connection. This time, Nastia noticed that the Emperor looked at her differently, although her grandfather had never loved her. The ruler stood up and asked Nastia if she knew who he was. The girl quickly puzzled the Emperor by informing him that he had the same eye and hair color as hers and emphasized that this meant he was her grandfather. The Emperor declared that she was the daughter of Beatrice, which meant that she was the princess of Santra by birth, to which the girl alarmedly reported that the words of the god Lux had come true. When the Emperor heard this, he asked about the details. Nastia stepped into the role and said that he came to her in a dream and said that she is a child who carries light and whose suffering will soon end. The girl said he also told her how she would soon meet her real family. Nastia gave herself a clear attitude, to lie and not blush, and fulfilled it 101%. The Emperor's legs buckled at what he heard. Even the pontiff himself was confused and considered it a miracle. For the women of the royal family, this statement was also a surprise, because it meant that revelations were coming to the princess. The Emperor approached his granddaughter and asked what else the god Lux had said. For Nastia, everything went according to plan, and she said that the bishop had told her that she would be protected by the strongest angel in the kingdom, and looked meaningfully at Pion. The choice was obvious to everyone, as this particular knight was the strongest of Lux God's warriors. The princess quickly reported that this angel had punished the bad people who had wronged her yesterday, and had also saved her when she nearly drowned. The Emperor was alarmed by what had happened and ordered not to take his eyes off the child, and he assigned this task to Sir Parcial, which marked another tick in Nastia's plan. When the girl was happy about her victory, Pion said that it was impossible. The man explained that his duties as a paladin left him no time for other errands. Just before Nastia's eyes, the plan crumbled like a house of cards. Aquila took the initiative to find the best knight to protect Anastasia. The elder aunt did not even bother to name the laws in order to achieve the goal. Pontiff Ishmael came to the knight's rescue. He confirmed that Pion cannot fulfill this assignment, and Aquila was again in a winning position. Only Anastasia was not going to give up. Gloomy Anastasia sat in her room and wondered who would be sent to her as a knight. Finally, the man introduced himself, and he turned out to be a well-known person who never performed his direct duties, but ran after the maids. At that time, Pion came to the room to say goodbye. The girl rushed to her father, clung to his robe, and asked him not to leave her. He tried to calm the princess down again, avoiding eye contact. Nastia resorted to all possible tricks, but could not convince Pion. Our heroine did not give up and put pressure on Pity in every possible way. Even Conrad was surprised by how well Parcial communicates with children. Pion, in turn, asked the girl to call him by any name, except Angel. The princess appreciated her father's request, and without thinking for a long time, she issued another appeal, which shocked Pion even more. Anastasia rejoiced at her next victory. She was now watching real terror in her father's eyes, as if something unthinkable had happened. When Pion asked not to call her dad anymore, Anastasia expressed the most vivid emotions and dissatisfaction, noting that he himself allowed to call him by any name. The man tried to explain to the princess that such a name does not belong to him by law. Anastasia fought with her gaze, and Pion unsuccessfully tried to understand the girl. Our heroine did not understand why her father runs away from her even when she gives him such a chance. Probably, in the depths of her heart, Nastia still hoped that he would stay with her. Pion was completely confused and did not know what to do, and the hysteria in Nastia was gaining the greatest momentum and was now raging loudly. Even Conrad decided to intervene. The new baboon guard suggested that Sir Percival not be upset about the name, but take it as an honor received from the princess. Nastia's goals became purposeful, and the girl slowly began to calm down. The little princess defeated the knight in an unequal fight and now received personal permission to call Pion her father. Early in the morning, the emperor decided to go to prayer. As his assistant did not stop the man, he still went to fulfill his plan, explaining that laziness is a long road to hell. The men heard that someone was in the prayer hall and became alert. As it turned out, the young princess was already praying. The emperor disturbed her and Anastasia turned to his rustling. Grandfather asked his granddaughter what she was doing here so early. Then Nastia continued to carry out her brilliant plan and declared that she heard Lux's voice in a dream and therefore went to look for him. And when she woke up, she found herself here. The emperor was angry that her personal bodyguard was not with the princess. Nastia begged in her voice not to harm the knight, and she thought to herself that it was time for Conrad to go into the abyss. When the grandfather asked what his granddaughter was praying for, the girl said that it was about forgiveness, because shame lives in her soul. The emperor laughed at her sins. In Santra, it was customary to go to the temple at least once every 15 days, otherwise a person was condemned by society. Then Anastasia confessed to the emperor that she had not visited the temple for a whole year, and considered it a sin. The grandfather tried to calm his grandson, believing that she had good reasons for this, which God will surely understand. Then the granddaughter burst into tears and declared that her heart was not in the right place because of these sins, and began to ask the emperor for permission to live in the cathedral and see God every day. Nastia said that she feels bad in the palace, but in the cathedral her thoughts become clearer. This statement shocked the emperor. The ruler also mentioned that Perseal had reported that his granddaughter possessed the art of sorcery. The man was aware of his daughter's abilities, which were also manifested at an early age, and all this indicated that he had an unusual child. The emperor weighed everything and made his decision, according to which from now on Anastasia could move to the cathedral and live there. The granddaughter could not be overjoyed at her next success and generously thanked her grandfather. Anastasia immediately went to the cathedral to her lovely friends, who greeted her joyfully. At that very time Pion came to the temple and the girl, seeing him, rushed to meet him with eloquent words. Our heroine was completely satisfied with how her plan was working. The news of the arrival of the princess spread quickly. Everyone was interested to know what she was like, and in general any details. They immediately began to discuss the question of why she does not live in the palace, as she should, but in the cathedral. One of the attendants warned the others not to gossip, but the questions were too interesting. And Anastasia herself was a person whom everyone paid attention to and about whom everyone talked. It was time for lunch and Sierra suggested we go to the dining room, but warned that there would be a lot of people there. Nastia did not have to ask for a long time. The three priestesses, who kindly agreed to serve the princess, and Anastasia headed for the great dining room. Everything suited our heroine, and even now she found luck in everything. The company split into two. The girls went to get food, and Sierra and Anastasia to choose a place to sit down for the meal. While the priestess looked like the most comfortable place, Nastia didn't waste her time either. From afar, she noticed Pion having lunch and immediately pointed in his direction and declared that she wanted to see her father every day. Our heroine immediately noticed that he was sitting far from the others, despite the fact that he stood out in the crowd, and assumed that he was being shunned for some reason. At that moment, Sierra had already approached the knight and now they greeted each other, slightly surprising the man with their appearance. It was especially inappropriate when Nastia turned to him, loudly calling him dad. For some reason, the girl decided that if she constantly appeared in his eyes, sooner or later he would feel something for her. While Sierra asked Pion for permission to sit next to her, Nastia could no longer refrain from eating the pancake in front of her. The princess immediately began to destroy this delicacy, causing everyone around to be moved. Out of the whole company, only Pion was in tension, as Anastasia periodically addressed him with various questions, continuing to call him dad. Sir Perseal maintained his subservience with a cold expression on his face, and Anastasia felt like a fish in water and showed a desire to be in such an environment every day. Even the priestesses were embarrassed by such a remark of the princess. Pion, not having finished his breakfast, decided to take a bow before Anastasia came up with something else. The princess then stated that he might anger the god by doing this and remarked that she did not want Lux to punish him. This moment was one of the most uncomfortable, because Pion was the center of attention and even felt dozens of eyes on him from his back. What was happening made him sit down and finish his meal, which caused the girl to be wildly delighted. At that moment, Anastasia noticed that her father had a sense of shame. Rumors quickly spread and reached even Anastasia's two aunts, after which Stella was indignant for a long time. The younger sister was not satisfied with the decisions made by her father and expressed her dissatisfaction to her older sister. Aquila then reminded Stella who their high priest was, hinting at his involvement in the cause. The sisters came to the conclusion that the pontiff invented the prophecy and lied to them. In addition, Aquila reminded that Ishmael knows that she does not believe in prophetic dreams and in God as such. In Aquila's eyes, the priest saw great opportunities for himself with the appearance of the bastard and took advantage of the opportunity. Stella completely lost her spirit, judging that Ishmael intended to put Nastia on the throne and rule the country through her. Aquila agreed with her sister's conclusions and added that the greatness of the clergy was due to the Father who exalted him. The sister offered to meet the enemy face to face. It's been a few days since our heroine was completely depressed and couldn't find joy in anything. As the priestess did not try to console the princess, but the girl thought about the fact that Pion stopped coming to the refectory after that meeting. Sierra tried to calm Nastia and explained that Sir Parcial was busy and therefore absent. But Nastia believed that he simply did not need her. The girl desperately lamented that she was fed up with her father and that he did not want to see her anymore. It was difficult for the priestesses to ignore such statements by Nastia. Sierra volunteered to talk to Pion, and the other girls decided she was the best candidate to do so. It was difficult for the priestess to start a conversation because she was ashamed of this night. But then Sierra blurted out in one breath a request to come to breakfast in the refectory in the morning because Princess Anastasia really wants to see him. Pion said directly that it is difficult for him to do this. Then Sierra explained that the princess was drawn to him and only for this reason the priestess asked at least sometimes to come to joint breakfasts. It was difficult for Pion to explain everything. And just as he began to speak, he was called out by a knight with an urgent report. The man immediately said that there were disturbing rumors about the princess at court. Rumors really spread at lightning speed. Their validity was variably confirmed by the fact that Princess Beatrice spent a whole year in the dark forest and people remembered it. At the same time, the knight reported that Anastasia's father, who is considered a collision mercenary, is being discussed. Pion took the news accordingly and immediately inquired as to who was spreading these rumors. Since it was not possible to identify the main prankster of this lie, Pion ordered to punish according to the law anyone who talks about it, and Sierra was worried that Nastia could also hear about it. Pion was visibly worried and the priestess took his emotions as concern for the princess. Then Sierra took advantage of the situation and invited her husband to breakfast again, adding that Nastia kept crying. These arguments simply could not fail to work, and in a few seconds Pion promised to come. Sierra thanked her and happily left with the good news. But the priestess came to her conclusions that Pion, for all his impenetrability, was far from an indifferent person. Our heroine finally got to the library, where she was not allowed in her past life. She was looking for books about magic, and when she found a valuable copy, she decided to wrap the fairy tale cover so that no one would be suspicious and study it well. Suddenly, Nastia heard someone's chatter. When the girl listened, it turned out that her father was being discussed and considered to be a collision. At that moment, the priestess discovered the princess and did not allow her to listen to the conversation. Rosa expressed concern about Nastia's absence, but the girl needed to find the necessary book. While the priestess admired her giftedness, the princess took her time to hear some more details of the conversation. Nastia knew that Aquila had started these rumors, but this time she did it much earlier, which meant that the future had already changed. Compared to the last time, Aquila chose a new tactic, this time resolutely rushing into battle. Nastia decided to change the course of history, remembering that she had attracted a lot of attention with her early magical abilities. Then it caused many disasters for Santra, and since Nastia did not provide any solutions to the people's problems, she caused deep dislike for herself. Anastasia absolutely did not understand what people wanted from her as a daughter of God. Our heroine remembered how the attributes of black magic were discovered in her room, clearly planted by Aquila's hand, and what this led to. In one of her lives, on the contrary, she was killed by an excessive magical energy that did not find a way out. The girl even had to experience death from the fangs of the wolves that attacked her when she escaped from her guardians. Nastia remembered that all her deaths were terrible and unfortunate, and the only thing she did not remember was how she died in the 9th life. The girl tried to learn lessons for herself from previous attempts and put 2 important points in the first place: to acquire magical power and acquire wealth. Only this meant that she would have to fundamentally change her approach to life, and this time she needed contact with Aquila. At that moment, the priestesses came and scared Nastia, interrupting her thoughts at the most important moment. At the same time, Pion was walking down the corridor and Sierra invited him to enter the princess's room. Nastia naively showed that she had read the family tree of the imperial family and declared. Our heroine wondered why the priestess did not have her patronymic name at the moment when Pion entered her room. Nastia knew that a special ceremony for the announcement of the patronymic name is held for royal persons. The girl clarified whether this is due to the fact that she does not have a father. Nastia, especially in the presence of Pion, said that she heard a conversation where they said that she is the daughter of a bad person. Anastasia hoped for Pion's reaction, at least this time. Then Nastia rushed to him and ran with her arms, calling her dad again. The man looked at her puzzled and said nothing in response. Then, Pion knelt before her and reminded her that she was part of the imperial blood. The knight asked Nastia not to listen to dirty gossip and not to believe them. As for the middle name, Pion promised Nastia to find out, and this conversation was witnessed by all three priestesses. Nastia thought in detail about everything that was happening, and visually threw herself into Pion's arms and tenderly thanked him, once again called him Dad. Although, to be honest, Pion's actions touched our girl. After the meeting with Anastasia, the man went to the pontiff to settle the matter with the ceremony of assigning the patronymic name to the princess. This was the first time Sir Percival had asked Ishmael for a favor, much to his dismay. Moreover, the question did not even concern him personally, but the knight still managed to agree. Ishmael finally noted that he was going to do this for the first and last time, and warned that it could destroy Pion. The New Year's festival has arrived, on which day all the nobility of the capital gathered for a collective prayer. Because of the war, people did not come to this event for a long time, so many people came now. Now Nastia had to join her relatives without much desire. But the girl was saved by her childhood naivety and immediacy. Anastasia set herself the task of radiating only confidence. Aquila asked Nastia how she was living in the cathedral, and invited her to return to the palace. But our heroine was not at all eager to meet her aunts so often, although Aquila did not give up and emphasized that she would still have to return. Nastia definitely saw no reason for her return to the palace, and remained silent. People began to gather, the bells rang, and Anastasia began to tremble, although she understood that it was impossible to show this to people. Suddenly, she saw Pion walking majestically, and that calmed her somewhat. Although new questions appeared, why the man is dressed like that? To be honest, our heroine herself fell in love with the greatness of this knight. While he was lying down, Nastia struggled with fascination and resentment towards this man. For a moment, father and daughter met their eyes. Now Nastia could not understand whether he was looking at her or still looked away, but in any case, everything was different than last time. The pontiff invited Pion to the tribune to honor him for his services in the war to the kingdom. He was a truly beautiful man and a true hero. No woman could take her eyes off him. The men, in turn, turned away from him. Sir Percival was honored for his exploits, remembering all his merits. But not everyone even applauded, and Nastia concluded that there are those who hate Pion for some reason. The girl decided that it was categorically dishonest, even more than dishonest. The emperor called for a prayer for the souls of the war victims. The time for the ceremony of announcing the patronymic name for Princess Anastasia was approaching. The ruler announced that the imperial family had lost Princess Beatrice, and also announced her daughter and proudly introduced Nastia. The princess confidently ran up to her grandfather. At the same time, she saw people looking at her with stony faces. The ceremony itself began directly, where the answer of the god was expected. To begin with, tablets with names were placed in a bowl with magical fire, and then holy water was added to it. The least damaged tablet was believed to bear Lux's reply. Nastia mentally begged for a proper paternal name for her. But suddenly the mystical rite was interrupted, because the magic fire went out. Of course, this caused a deep commotion among the visitors. But Nastia knew whose hands this matter belonged to, since the spell came directly from her relative. Of course, the disappearance of the blessed fire was considered a bad omen. All this made Anastasia very angry, because she did not foresee such an action by her aunt, who had prepared everything in advance. Ismail offered to light the fire, but Nastia said that she would handle it herself. Our heroine decided to take a risk and correct this bad sign. The girl decided that it would be more expensive to wash off the black rumor that would fly away with the speed of the wind. Yes, she took a risk, but still decided. Nastia used witchcraft and uttered a spell. It worked miraculously, and the fire filled the bowl again. It was a spectacular sight for everyone present, especially considering that the princess used magic herself. For the cousin aunts, it was also a surprise to learn that their niece possessed medium-level magic. There was an uproar in the hall, and everyone began to discuss Nastia's great abilities. Even the pontiff did not expect this, but still decided to finish the ceremony first. Ishmael took out the tablet and froze for a moment, and Nastia could not wait to see what the future had in store for her, on which a lot depended. Finally, Ishmael said the name. Nastia was completely confused by what she heard. Those present were even more confused because this name was one of the names of the god Lux. Nastia was completely lost in how all this magical power works and came to the conclusion that God was simply mocking her. The pontiff concluded the ceremony by announcing her full name. Suddenly, one of those present stood up and drew attention to himself. The man asked to hear the truth that he wanted to discover in this holy place, and said that he, as a representative of the cabinet, did not recognize the results of this ceremony as valid. The pontiff asked Count Stein for an explanation. Then the man said that there were no statements from the imperial family about the identity of the father of the princess. The count also informed about the rumors that are circulating in this regard. Once again, Nastia's plan was crumbling before her eyes, but she decided that whatever would happen. Ishmael reminded of Beatrice's will and recognition of Anastasia as a princess by the family. But the representative of the ministry did not calm down, calling all this nonsense. Only the pontiff was not going to give up, informing the count about the prophecy that the priesthood had received on the eve of Anastasia's arrival. People were outraged by this news. In the end, the emperor could not stand the accusations against his daughter and stopped Count Stein. The ruler reminded that his daughter fought with the enemy and does not deserve the accusations against her, and declared that he will not allow any appeal against Nastia's decisions. The emperor's words calmed the count. Of course, our heroine expected disturbances, but it was strong and finally everything ended. When Nastia returned to the cathedral, the priestesses bombarded her with questions. The girl naively reported that she had been casting a spell with the help of knowledge accidentally obtained from a book. At that moment, Sierra said that Nastia looks a lot like her mother. The girl remembered that Pion had said the same words. Anastasia decided to take advantage of the moment and ask what her mother was like. Then Rosa plunged into her memories, and all she could come up with was that she was a woman of extraordinary beauty with enormous talent. The priestess added that her power surpassed all mages of this century. The girl also added that Beatrice had a good character and maintained friendly relations with many. For the first time, Nastia heard such pleasant words about her mother, supplemented by tender and strong hugs. Anastasia finally decided that if her mother was so good, it was Pion who put a stain on her reputation. Even if we assume that his mother seduced him, Pion is still callous and cold, so he was the only one to blame for all the troubles. Although sometimes it seemed to Nastia that they were getting closer. Now Yus alone accompanied the girl and was afraid that she would not have fun. But the princess was pleased that the priestess cared about her and understood her. Anastasia said that she was fine even with her alone, and they decided to walk in the garden. For the first time, Yus saw this amazing corner that was created and maintained with the help of magic. And Nastia's eyes widened, because she too saw such beauty for the first time. The priestess went to make tea, and the girl looked at the flowers. For a moment, Nastia remembered her past life, where she lived under a castle and saw the garden only from the window. She really wanted her life to change and become better now. While walking, Nastia saw an open gate and a flow of energy coming out of it. Feeling a familiar feeling, the girl went to meet him. She opened the door and heard some words. The phrase caused a terrible headache in Nastia. Also at this moment, terrible memories came flooding back. She saw the boy and now she was trying to understand who he was. When the young man turned around, he asked who she was, and Nastia fell to the ground in pain. The girl came to her senses at the moment when she was again in the arms of her worried father. Pion immediately began to ask anxiously what had happened to her. The husband decided to show the princess to a doctor, but Nastia reassured her father, assuring her that she was not in pain. Anastasia was again in Pion's arms and was already cheerfully responding to Yus's call. Finally, the no less alarmed priestess found the lost princess. Yus asked Pion to stay and drink tea with them. Having struggled a little with himself, the man still decided to share tea with the priestess and Anastasia. The prepared treats were very attractive, but Nastia was afraid that they might contain poison, since they had been given by the imperial cook, and she was suspicious of food in general. Then our heroine mentally returned to the events outside the door, where she definitely heard the spell and assumed that maybe the guy was an assassin mage. Nastia even thought about the fact that it could be a mercenary assassin sent by Aquila. And even if you remove such an opportunity, she still felt uncomfortable. Yus kindly offered Pion his favorite tea. The man was pleased with this kind of attention to his reclusive persona, and besides, he really liked Lys's tea. Nastia had heard that linden tea always makes you want to smile, so now the girl was waiting for the appropriate reaction from Pion. Our heroine felt happy being with these people, and Pion generally gave her a complete sense of security. And now Nastia put on her unfailing mask again and turned to Pion with a new proposal. She asked to go with him to the drill, trying to do everything to spend more time with him, but was categorically refused. Nastia kept up with the intended position and said that she wanted to look at the knights. The princess lost in this battle, and it didn't help her even to squint her eyes. Then Anastasia decided to take the help of a friend, and Yus not only did not refuse help, but also successfully coped with the assignment. The priestess immediately changed her face and worriedly announced that she urgently needed to leave for a while, and asked Pion to look after the princess. The man already felt some kind of conspiracy behind his back and understood that he had fallen into an invisible girl's trap. The man knew that there was a long way to go to the garrison, and Nastia was just wondering what Yus had done. When the girl realized what she had done, she rushed to thank her assistant. Then Nastia joyfully opened her arms and asked Pion to carry her in his arms, again gently calling him dad. The man was deeply perplexed, but there was nothing he could do. After some time, Pion and Nastia came to the garrison and watched the sparring of the two knights. The girl was not even going to get off her father's hands and continued to admire the strength of the wrestlers. At some point, the female knight defeated Regina and he fell. At the same time, the woman noticed Marshal Percival. Of course, Nastia attracted the attention of new people. As it turned out, the princess became a local celebrity, who was rumored to be a young magician and a magical girl. The young woman introduced herself as PR and explained that she was the first deputy marshal. But Nastia knew that she was not only the strongest female knight in the history of the order, but also just a cool girl. The same boy who had been defeated still couldn't get up. But then finally the boy raised his eyes. As it turned out, for Anastasia, he turned out to be an insanely handsome young man. While the girl was in a state of euphoria from the attention, the knights approached them. Everyone was interested to meet the cute princess. PR even had to calm the boys down so they wouldn't embarrass the little girl with the whole crowd. But when Nastia called Pion dad, even PR couldn't help but smile, although the girl wanted to tell everyone that he was actually her father. The deputy marshal ordered Regina to show the garrison to the princess, and added that he was only good for that for now. The woman's words touched the boy, but he agreed to follow the older woman's instruction. Shy Regina extended his hand to the princess and invited her on a tour. Nastia took his hand without thinking long and stepped forward, remembering where she knew his name from. The girl paid attention to his blue eyes, in addition to the presence of light blonde hair, and finally remembered that it was Regina Tigris. Nastia knew that he would become a famous night mage. And besides, Regina will become the best student of the wonderful Pion. Nastia looked at this boy and found him bright and humble, like an angel. She also knew this heroic knight, and now she could not believe that it was the same person. The girl absolutely did not see even a drop of courage in Regina's face, and the boy, besides, was embarrassed by her attention. In addition, he remembered the words of the teacher, who compared him to a child, and Anastasia herself decided that what Pyre said oppressed him. Then Nastia said that it is very cool to become a knight of Verita's castle, and emphasized that for this you need to manage a divine gift. The latter differed from magic in that it was not inherited by blood and could appear in any person, but its bearers were very few. Everyone knew that people with a divine gift, regardless of their origin, became part of the clergy or paladins. Suddenly, Regina admitted to Nastia that he could not use his divine gift, which caused an appropriate reaction. The boy was in despair and knew that he would soon be asked to leave the garrison because of this. Regina admitted to Nastia that the marshal personally asked for him. The boy also added that he would never forget their first meeting with the great knight. He told Nastia that once his village was attacked by monsters and destroyed everything. In that monster attack, Regina lost his father, and his mother lay unconscious in the ruins, and he also said goodbye to his life. And suddenly, out of nowhere, his savior, appeared. Regina was already scared then, but he was even more scared. He had seen with his own eyes how Sir Percival had dealt with the monsters with ease. Then the man came to his house and saved the mother by giving her his healing divine power. Regina told Nastia how the marshal called him with him to the capital and helped him join the order. Now the boy was in deep despair because he could not control the gift. Regina suggested that he may not have the gift at all, and the marshal brought him simply out of pity. But Nastia interceded for Pion and called the man fair and righteous, which caused the boy to be surprised by her vocabulary. But even here our heroine got out of it, telling the boy that she just likes to read books. Then the girl grabbed Regina by the hand and ordered him to follow her. Nastia decided to urgently correct the state of affairs. The princess drew the boy to the tree and told him that she would help him master the divine gift. The girl could not watch how sad this future and once strongest knight was now, and therefore decided to practice immediately. Regina denied that magic and a divine gift were different, but Nastia already knew that each ability used its own resource, but the principle of action was the same. The princess also told Regina that he lacked self-confidence, so he had no ability to draw prana. The boy wondered how she knew all this, but Nastia could not admit that she understood all this from personal experience, so she simply said that books help in everything. The princess told Regina to pull herself together and use her gift, but to be honest, she wanted to ask that she not be as spoiled as she was in her past life. It seemed to the boy for a moment that Nastia disliked the marshal, but the girl did not even leave time to think and demanded to start. And Regina started, but he did it in such a way that even the plant was horrified, begging to stop this torture. At some point, it seemed to Nastia that part of the leaf had healed. But it only seemed to her because the plant remained as it was. Only Nastya still wanted to believe that changes had taken place, and she did not want to hear anything else. And poor Regina burst into hysterical laughter. He really liked that the princess was trying so hard for him. He even noted that she inspired him with confidence. The boy sincerely thanked Nastya, which caused her embarrassment, because she heard words of thanks addressed to her for the first time. Suddenly, Regin realized that he allowed himself to be too familiar, stroking the princess on the head, and began to apologize. Then Nastya admitted that she would really like to have such a brother. Regina didn't even have to be persuaded. He immediately offered Nastya to consider him as her named brother. She was very pleased to be surrounded by another good person, and she asked permission to address him by name. Suddenly someone intervened in their conversation and called the boy. The boy immediately started mocking Regin, calling him a nanny. Then Nastya's brother demanded a suitable address because the princess herself was in front of him. And for the visitor, this circumstance became extremely interesting. The young man came closer and introduced himself to Nastya with a bow, calling himself Ark, the son of Count Eleanor. But the girl did not like his familiar address to her at all. Nastya decided for herself that this was another representative of the nobility, who considered himself a treasurer, and assumed that he was from the competing order of dignitas. She knew that the knights of this order were arrogant and could use aura and magical power. The knight immediately asked what the little lady had lost here, who definitely had no place to be in the forests. Nastya was not confused and answered that she could go wherever she wanted, and added that she was interested in the valiant knights of Santra. The haughty stranger offered to show her his strength, emphasizing that Regin was completely powerless. He also humiliated the boy by doubting the choice of a marshal at his expense, considering him completely incompetent. Regin couldn't stand it anymore and chased away the insolent visitor who dared to insult his commander. The young knight was not inferior to him. Nastya clearly understood that a not weak fight was brewing. And suddenly this ruffian came clean about the fact that the past of their marshal was hidden from the common people, and added that if people knew, the situation would be completely different. Nastya became interested in what was in Pion's past, and Regin was ready to burst into battle from minute to minute. The boy demanded an apology from the offender of his commander, but Ark began to insult Regina further, calling him powerless in the management of the divine gift. Nastya imagined the balance of forces and the approximate result in the event of their battle. She needed to urgently intervene in this matter, and she intervened, using magic. Nastya was quite good at attacking a stranger with cones that were lying nearby. Even for Anastasia herself, what she did was a surprise, since the girl learned this spell only a few days ago. And yet Nastya pretty much beat the ruffian with simple Christmas tree cones. To Ark's claim, the princess replied that someone should take out the garbage, which particularly offended the young woman. In addition, Nastya informed Ark that he had tarnished his knightly honor. The princess reminded the boy of the knight's code, which said that one should respect one's fellow servants. The girl also reminded him that dignitas translates as honor, and said that he had no right to be called his knight. The insulted and humiliated guy ran away without even saying goodbye. After everything, Regin turned to Nastya and said that she is truly a person of royal blood, because she is very brave and speaks words full of strength, and suggested that she might be even tougher than his marshal. But the princess also gave him a good night's sleep, demanding that he think 100 times next time before taking out his sword. Even by the end of the day, Ark could not recover from what had happened. He still couldn't believe that a 4-year-old girl scolded him so much that he had to run away, confused and ashamed. He had many questions where just one spell was worth what. Moreover, this was not her first sorcery that she performed in front of him. Ark was in despair, because he was no match for her strength. One moment the maid disturbed the boy and informed him that his father was waiting for him at her place. Count Eleanor, who was deputy marshal of the Order of Dignitas, congratulated his son. When the father saw the beaten Ark, he immediately asked who did it, but the boy could not confess to his father and be ashamed in front of him. The count asked about his success, particularly his mastery of the Flamma Gladius. It was a special technique of wielding a fireball. The son admitted that he still has 0 achievements in this area, which caused his father to be very angry. The count reminded Ark that the imperial family accepted the bastard and gave him the title of princess. Besides, the priests have enormous power thanks to the love of the people. The man blamed Pion for everything, because he became a knight at the age of 10, and now the count demanded no less results from his son. Father ordered Ark to glorify their family. Meanwhile, Nastya was tossing and turning in her bed and couldn't sleep because of what happened to her. Despite everything, her first attempt at magic had been a major success, and besides, she had put an insolent aristocrat in his place, and now she was so happy that she couldn't sleep from excitement. Nastia decided from now on to go to the garrison and train there, and in addition to see her father, thus killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Then she remembered that she would have to meet Ark as well. The girl began to remember where she had heard this name in her past life, and finally remembered. Ark was her Aunt Stella's fiancé, who died falling off a cliff. With the dawn of a new day, our heroine began to carry out her plan. The first attempt turned out to be unsuccessful, and Nastia received Pion's categorical refusal. They reached the 4th attempt, but the man stood his ground. The little princess was not going to give up either. Attempt number 10 already made Pion quite angry, but he, as before, did not agree to the girl's persuasion. Nastia tried almost all her angelic and devilish tricks, but still did not give up. As a result, it is not difficult to guess who won. Nastia noticed that her father seemed to have revived in recent days. The priestess also noticed this, and she was glad because she was warmly indifferent to the 2 of them. The woman really wanted this child to be happy always. Regine met Nastia with an amazing gift. The girl was doubly pleased because she received a beautiful gift in the form of a kite and also got into the garrison. Nastia had fun from the bottom of her heart, and Regine continued to notice that she still talked like a grown-up aunt, although she still remained a child at heart. Anastasia told her friend that dragons appear in the world once every 100 years and remembered that this monster is also depicted on the Pion emblem. The girl wanted to see her father and decided to call him. Regine was even frightened by her courage and fearlessness in front of the marshal. Nastia admitted that she used to be afraid of him, but now something has changed. Her friend asked her to return to the garrison, but Nastia wanted to stay in this place because there is a strong wind here. Yes, Regine was afraid because he didn't want to anger the commander. Suddenly, Nastia noticed Ark in the thicket of trees. He was diligently engaged in his business and did not even notice outsiders. The girl remembered again that in the past life he would be overtaken by death in 3 years. Then Nastia decided not to think about him, because he is Stella's fiancé, which meant that if he did not die, he would unite with his aunt, and together with her, she would do abominable things to her. Nastia imagined for a second how she would go up to Ark and directly declare that he was destined to die in 3 years. Probably he would have decided that the princess was pronouncing a death curse on him. Then our heroine decided that she should at least change her fate, and left the others to themselves. But Nastia noticed how he was exhausted from failure. Ark had no way of mastering the necessary skill in turning the aura into fire. Spells were not given to him at all, and the boy finally lost faith in himself. Nastia immediately said that the spell he was casting was dangerous and added that before using it, it was necessary to study other elements. Ark stated that of course he had mastered all the necessary knowledge. But the princess exposed him in a lie, because otherwise he would not have drowned in his past life. Nastia offered him her help in mastering the elements. Ark was furious that the little girl was going to teach him. As always, Nastia thought about one thing and said something completely different, so she politely offered her help, stressing that she herself teaches magic. But for Ark, her help seemed humiliating and he categorically refused. Only Nastia did not lose her pride and immediately left the ungrateful aristocrat. Ark wanted to achieve the result himself. He remembered the words of his father, who had warned him that if he did not advance in magic, he would be disinherited. Altogether made him so angry that the magical powers of fire responded. Ark was very happy, because it promised him a knighthood, and the boy was happy early. The fire went out of his control. Nastia asked Regina to run to Pion for help, and she went to Ark herself. The princess ran to the boy's help and shouted for him to drop the sword, otherwise it would burn. Since Ark could not open his fingers, and the situation was getting out of control, Nastia decided to call on the magic of water. She failed to break this spell. All the events unfolded with such force that it seemed to Nastia that everything happened like a movie and she died again. But when the girl raised her eyes, she saw Regina, who was able to break the spell and now tamed the power of fire. Regina got out and put out the fire. Rather, it was his divine gift that suddenly opened up. But even the boy himself did not understand that this was the power that was supposed to come to him. Nastia quickly drew her conclusions and was glad that Regine had activated his strength in an urge to protect his little sister. The boy said that Ark's hands were burnt and he needed healing power. Regina could only hope that he was heard when he called for help. And suddenly the boy's face changed dramatically. Nastia still did not understand what his strange look was talking about now. And this meant that he had been heard and now they were clearly in danger of not boasting. The marshal, whom no one had ever seen so angry, asked what had happened. Even Nastia was scared, not to mention Regina. Pion immediately healed Ark's hands. Nastia noticed that the victim was so worried that he had no face. Pion turned to Ark and reminded him of the knightly statutes that forbade the casting of high-level spells without the presence of a senior in rank. The boy was crying and didn't even try to make excuses. Then Pion continued and declared that for such an act he could be immediately and for life expelled from the order. Nastia was horrified by what was happening and did not understand why the other mentors were silent. Despite everything, the princess decided to steer the situation herself, asking her father not to judge Ark so harshly. At that moment, Edwin appeared and declared that he was a marshal of the Dignitas Night Order, and therefore he was the one to judge the boy's punishment. Kiana was outraged that Sir Alter was trying to argue against the charter. Nastia found the visitor an unpleasant person and continued to observe the situation. The marshal of his order asked Ark why he would perform such a spell in the presence of the princess. The man suggested that perhaps Anastasia herself had asked him to show her higher level magic, offering the boy, so to speak, the correct answer to his question. Nastia immediately understood what all this threatened her with. Theon immediately came to the defense of the princess, but Ark turned out not to be as rotten as he seemed at first glance and told the truth, declaring that the princess did not ask him for anything. The boy admitted that he did it himself and added that Nastia tried to save him. Our heroine observed the situation and understood that honesty is a good thing, but in this case she was playing against Ark and was now openly destroying him. On the other hand, Nastia thought that he would escape death on the battlefield in this way. But then the princess again decided to save the situation and took a total risk, declaring that she was the one who begged him to show her the fiery sword. The princess' statement shocked everyone present. The complacent Marshal Edwin rejoiced at the correctness of his assumption and offered to limit himself to punishment. And Nastia was now ashamed to look Pion in the eyes. But the man was not angry with her and was just worried that the princess was very scared and now needed to rest. And at the same time he made his voice 10 times colder than usual. From that moment, Nastia was forbidden to visit the garrison, which caused considerable damage to her grandiose plans. Our heroine remembered the expression on her father's face and was now afraid to meet him. The girl blamed everything on her stupid desire to help others. Suddenly Rosa announced that she had a guest. Only 2 visitors appeared at the door at once. Ark immediately bent down on his knee and asked the princess to accept his gift of loyalty, almost nailing the girl with a bouquet of flowers. Nastia was pleased to see the 2 of them together and also as friends. Ark thanked the princess and admitted that if it weren't for her, his father would have strangled him with his own hands for leaving the order. He wanted to thank Nastia with something, and our heroine decided to ask him to serve her with faith and truth, thus surrounding himself with faithful people. Ark understood that such an oath was given only to the current emperor, but he was ready to make and fulfill such a promise for Nastia. When Regin heard that Ark was going to say an important oath, he, despite being a paladin, volunteered to participate in such a ceremony as well. And then Nastia solemnly pulled out a rose from the bouquet and began consecrating the 2 boys to her faithful knights. Everything happened quite seriously, despite the fact that there was no sword, and Nastia was only on the way to becoming an empress. The boys pronounced their vows so seriously that even our heroine mistook them for real faithful puppies. Before the solemn consecration ceremony ended, Rosa informed Nastia that the emperor was waiting for her.